Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm delighted that we are starting this series on maps of meaning. This is the core work of Jordan Peterson. Um, People believe that for some reason, people think it's a complicated book. It's a difficult book to read. I have never believed that. I think it's the most amazing book. It's beautifully organized. And I know that Roger has spent a lot of time thinking about it and working on it. So I'm just delighted to have, and the pair, Roger and Claire, we've gone through 12 Rules of Life, as well as the personality series, and it just works beautifully. Two different voices, two different approaches. And to that, we are adding Victor, who's going to give his own take at the end of each session. So I think it's going to be a very good format. We're going to make it easy for you to follow along. At the same time, we are going to invite you to put a lot of work into actually reading the book so you can get the maximum out of it. I have a new announcement. I've just launched 52 Living Ideas Reddit, so we can go ahead and keep discussing this before and afterwards. So there is, if you go to Reddit/r/52 Living Ideas, please join and join the discussion before the meetups, after the meetups. I'll be posting the videos there. So let's continue the discussion after that. All right. So with that, let me hand it over to Roger and Claire.
Thank you very much, Shrikant, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Today, we're going to be taking a general overlook. This is just to kind of set expectations for what we're going to be talking about tonight for anyone who got to see the lecture. There's not going to be a lot of solutions in this conversation. What we're trying to do in this one is much more frame what the problem of the book is. What exactly is Jordan Peterson trying to address? And making sure that we understand the question he's attempting to answer before we even start trying to get into any solution. So first and foremost, Claire, do you mind putting up the deck so that we can look at a couple of the main points that are going to be tried to be made in this, that were made in this lecture. So these are just a couple of questions that I've put that are essentially the main questions that Peterson is attempting to answer during this lecture. Almost all of these, by the end, will hopefully have provided an answer for, but they essentially kind of all link together. So it starts with, how does our adaption of empiricism change how we approach religion and religious thought? 2, what functions does religion serve for humans besides being an inaccurate story of events? 3, what fills the void to replace the function of what was once religious in nature? 4, why is a belief structure a requirement? 5, how is a religious presupposition and morality linked? 6, what is the dilemma that Nietzsche points out? 7, what is the Jungian solution to that dilemma? 8, why are the Nuremberg trials a possible signal for a move in the right direction? And 9, how does Peterson reconceptualize morality? These are all the main case that he makes through this argument. And the main way that we want to kind of frame this is we're going to be going through the Maps of Meaning TiVo lecture series. And both me, Claire, and Victor will all kind of be backing it up by different research that we've done on our own, as well as research into Peterson's work and familiarity with the Maps of Meaning book. So we'll try to mostly frame the argument that's in the book according to the TiVo series that he created, just to kind of keep us all on track. But to start us off, the first thing he starts is by naming his thesis, which is essentially why the thumbnail for the YouTube video is a Frankenstein. And the thesis is human created monsters. For here, Peterson is going to first and foremost start by laying out at what level we're actually talking. And to give you a general idea, this is going to be one of the easiest ones to cover and one of the easiest ones to explain. And we're essentially going to start off with the death of God in the Nietzschean sense. So that's kind of where we're going. And thank you, TVO. Sorry. not TiVo. And so to start off, Peterson kind of points to a general sense of the symbolism of monsters, especially monsters such as Frankenstein, or monsters in which technology has gone awry, where technology has advanced too much and it's actually to our detriment. And Peterson kind of asks, well, why is it that, the collective unconscious seems to have that fear? And he kind of uses this to frame up the main condition of modernity, which is, for the past 500 years, we've essentially been on a rocket to the moon in technological advancement. However, as we've created this technological advancement, thanks to the scientific perspective that we've created, we've only learned how to do things, but we still lack the ability to discern what it is we should do. This is going to lead to a very big danger, in the sense that science only helps us understand how things work, but it doesn't give us any information on what it is we should do. And we're going to expand that actual problem as to what that means for religion, what that means for morality, and what that means for society and culture as a whole. And very quickly, this small problem that doesn't seem to actually be that consequential can very quickly rain chaos on a lot of different things. And that's essentially Peterson's main thesis. And
yeah, as you're saying, Roger, I think this really the entire presentation and what we're going to talk about today is really only setting up this problem. And the problem is, why did he write this book? What is this book here to respond to? And this man-made monster, this Frankenstein's monster is that. And so, as Roger is saying, that is the response to a 500-year rocket ship towards science that has left us potentially with some gaps. So, stay patient as we dive into really setting up what is the philosophical problem that we're going to kind of walk you through today. And only at the end of this presentation, really, can we even start to kick off and really get started into the philosophy here. But we're taking, steps back and setting up, who is that monster that science has created.
So the first thing that you may ask yourself is, well, okay, what is the actual danger here? And the first danger is, as we've developed our scientific capacity, we've gained a lot of benefits, as Peterson notes. We've gained a lot of benefits medically and technology and in just about every dimension of life. However, we've also gained a lot in the capacity for destruction. Nuclear weapons are now actually dated. They're old school, right? Like, they're not even seen as the biggest threat nowadays. Information warfare and AI, and we can go down a list of all the amazing and creative ways that humans have managed to learn how to either manipulate or destroy each other with. And Peterson then asks, well, as we've abandoned our myths and as we've abandoned our religious structures, was the only consequence of that we gained more technology? Or was there other consequences that we don't quite know? Because it seems that as time has progressed, questions of meaning, questions of morality, and other aspects of that sense seem to have only grown in importance, while at the same time, they've become more and more obscure and more difficult to actually answer. We don't even have a response anymore. Though, the previous one may have only been religion, we now have no response. So this is going to come down to the main problem of is versus ought. And this is a problem for those who have followed me and Claire with the rules problem, the idea of just because you know how things are doesn't mean you know how they should be. And that's kind of the general scientific problem. So to kind of finish this first introduction, I would like to play a video from a film that is exactly what Peterson's talking about. A film that really shows us the dangers of technology and the danger of what happens when science advances without any capacity to discern what it should do. And Claire, would you mind?
Absolutely. And I think that the part that really stuck with me here is what, sure, technological and science advances are amazing. They have brought us out of poverty and brought us to the state we are now as humanity. But if you're developing weapons and tools, you better be sure that you're smarter than those tools and that your consciousness is evolving at that same level. And perhaps that's a place where we've failed. So I'm going to try, who knows how this audio will work, but we're going to play a little bit of a fun clip here. Someone just holler if this isn't working at all, but let's try it out.
If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
That's great.
And just as Dr. Ian Malcolm says, your scientists were so preoccupied with if they could do it that they didn't stop to think if they should do it. And that difference, the fact that science itself can't provide any moral direction, is going to be one of Peterson's biggest points as for not just Peterson, also Jung and Nietzsche's points for why the collapse of religion as a structure was more than just stories and myths that were lost. But in order to even understand that, we need to first get to, well, what was it that people saw beforehand, right? What was it? How did we see the world before science? And Peterson, gives a couple quotes here, but he first kind of points out that before science, the world as an object and the affect that it has on you, the actual sensation, the actual effect any object had on you, were one and the same. There was not a separation. You didn't see the world as two separate things. And you could see it even, for example, in medieval or in any old fantasy worlds where they have swords that seem to have magical qualities or qualities of a mythical nature. And many times the reason they have qualities of mythical nature is because they've achieved something so significant, like at certain battle, they achieved something, and then the fact of that history becomes a part of the object itself. There's a quote here. Claire, did you want to read the quote, or did you want us to?
Yeah, let's read it. The Jung.
Yeah, for Jung.
Yeah, I don't think I pulled it in. So
that's fine. I got it right here. I can read it. But Peterson reads this in a lecture. For anyone who didn't catch it, Peterson quotes Jung here and says, how totally did the world appear to medieval man? For him, the earth was eternally fixed, and it rests in the center of the universe, encircled by the course of the sun that solicitously bestowed its warmth. Men were all children of God, unto the loving care of the Most High, who prepared them for the eternal blessedness, and all knew exactly what they should do and how they should conduct themselves in order to rise from the corruptible world into the incorruptible and joyous existence. Such a life no longer seems real to us, even in our dreams. Natural science has long ago torn this lovely veil to shreds. And what Jung's kind of pointing to here was that as we're describing that, as you're hearing that, it immediately strikes you as superstitious and not realistic, and obviously not how the world actually is. And he kind of points that it's natural science that is the thing that has made that belief impossible. But in order to even understand what believing that even functioned as, is you need to understand what actual use those beliefs would have. So one, it was comforting. It allowed you to see the world, one, that you have a purpose, two, that death is not the thing that you should fear, three, that you have inherent meaning, that the world was created for you.
I think there's also comfort in the place that we as humans existed in that medieval mentality, also in that in that selfishness that, you know, individuals exist within the cosmos, as things exist as they appear, and you and your village and your country and earth are at the center of that, and everything else kind of revolves around that. And what comfort to find in that, because it's inherently meaningful, right? We are at the center, and of course destroying that is painful in itself, amongst other things.
And additionally, at that point, like there wasn't any other theories, right? That there might be people that didn't like God or even maybe didn't believe in God, but there wasn't an alternative theory that was directly competing with any form of strong evidence outside of a different narrative, such as another religion. And this is kind of Peterson uses this to attempt to make the case for how the two different perspectives were one and the same. And I found using Jung a little bit more difficult here because Jung's always a little bit harder to understand. So I also pulled a story from that book. That's the story of a toddler. So Peterson also asks us to make the exact same point, asks us to consider a 2-year-old that's just walking around and sees a glass what's he call it? Sculpture. Sorry, thank you. He sees this glass sculpture and she reaches out for it and grabs it because she's fascinated by, it's shiny and shimmery. It's cool to the touch. And immediately, as soon as she grabs it, the mother comes in, makes a big racket and scares her and takes it from her and tells her she should never, under any circumstances, touch that. Peterson then asks us, what is it that the kid just learned? Did it just learn only its physical aspects, only the, or did it learn that object's also dangerous, at least within the context of, if my mother sees me, that object now becomes dangerous. Additionally, she also found that, oh, I can touch a lot of other things here, but apparently that should not be messed with because it's preferred to stay in the state it's currently at. Both of those aspects now inform the child how she should act towards that object, right? And then the question is, well, is that not also a part of the object? Is it not reasonable for the child to then associate, it's like, well, that object means I don't touch it, and it means, at least when mom's here, because kids naturally will find the loophole, keep pushing the boundary, that as long as mom's here, I'm not supposed to touch that. That's the behavior that's been taught, and it's within the object itself, because if we got rid of that object, none of those rules would be relevant. So that little aspect is not just for that specific object, but for every object. And all children do that. And more importantly, all human beings classify and do it like that. And it's the exact same way, the same way the child sees that glass sculpture and associates both its material properties as well as social cultural properties, which is the second dimension, as the same thing. It's the exact same way medieval people used to see the world. They would see it as both the material object itself and its social cultural connection. Now, when science comes in, it's a brand new tool that actually allows us to separate the two. But once we separate the two, what we later find is that same tool that allows us to separate the two undermines one of the things that it separates, which is meaning, because it invalidates it as something that isn't provable. And that brings us now to the heavier part of this. And the next question then becomes, well, what happens when we do that? When we separate what things inherently mean to us from what things can we all agree the thing is? Or as Peterson puts it, the thing in itself and the thing as an item, as what it matters. And so, sorry, Claire, did you have anything
No, where are we left then? And Peterson has this quote that he says, natural science has torn that lovely veil to shreds. And I think you see that in the childhood, the child metaphor, because, okay, cool, science has illuminated this element of it, but what are we left with other than sort of shreds to pick up the pieces? And that's an argument that Nietzsche makes better than anyone.
Right. And Peterson kind of puts this to question. It's like, look, it's obvious that science has given us, a wealth of great things and plenty of good tools to use. And then the next question is, has it made us any wiser? Has it endowed us with any more wisdom as to how we should act? And he points to the 20th century as an example of obviously not, right? And I didn't know how deep you want to go into the Russians, but
yeah, Peterson, I think, this is heavy for him because he's a historian as much as everything else, which there are many things. And the question here is, how could we sever the ties that our ancestors in this mythology built and suffer no ill consequences as a result? And what he really paints a picture of is that the 20th century was extremely bloody, the most in history. 6 million dead in the Soviet Union between 1919 and 1959, and potentially twice as much in the cultural revolutions of China. And what this tells us is, okay, if we look at these sort of radical mentalities, they are not predicated on the same religious basis that we see historically when we look into medieval periods, but they tend to lead to the same outcomes. And why is that? I think Peterson quotes here, he says, looking back at the 20th century, one thing seems relatively clear. Although humanity as a whole had ceased to engage in large-scale religious conflicts, ability to live together still seemed incredibly compromised by our capacity to engage in ideological conflicts. And why is that?
Right. And essentially the argument goes, if the destruction of religion was supposed to actually enlighten us all, if the destruction of these superstitions that weren't real and that had no real value outside of just comforting us of death anxiety or something of that nature, then it would only follow that we would actually function much better and be able to use our rationality to create systems that would function much better than these ancient, barbaric, ritualistic religions, right? Like we could build a better system. And that's, for Peterson, he's like, we saw that play out. That's how we got the Nazis. That's how we got, a lot of these big extreme examples of, we can't just seem to create our own ideas of what we should do. And what Peterson points out, he says, well, what went wrong here? And what he says is the science helped us get rid of the empirical inaccuracies in our religion, but it didn't remove the tendency for humans to form groups. And more importantly, it didn't remove the tendency for those groups to then form a collective belief. And because we still have that inherent natural tendency as an animal, as a social animal, it's inevitable that just because you got rid of the rational aspect of the religion, that we're not still going to form some other system to organize ourselves with.
And even more than that, it's possible then that those issues of meaning and of belief are even more paramount because of the lack of those other existing sort of cultural structures that permeate. Because science has made life so freaking easy, what is more paramount to people than finding that ideological basis to kind of fill that void?
So from there, he kind of moves in a little bit more into Russia and talks about how Russia is a great example of what happens when the religious system collapses. And then there's an emptiness. And he quotes Nietzsche here, which I do want to read real quick. Or Claire, would you like to read this one?
Yes.
Or either one I can do.
Yeah, I'm happy. We're starting with Christianity, right?
No, the other one.
Okay.
There you go.
Yep. You want me to?
Yeah. Or either one. I'll do it. Yeah. I'll read it. So what Peterson's main question here is essentially, what happens when someone loses their belief system? What happens when, for example, in Russia, all those people lose their faith in God? because of the rise of science. And he says, well, there's a couple ways you can look at it. One is, good for them. Myth, religion isn't real. God isn't real. So everyone actually is going to be much more empirical. They're going to be much more rational and actually better human beings because they're not going to have that old tradition. And then he points out, it's like, well, what if myths don't function like that? What if that's not the function of myths? What if it wasn't just a mechanism to comfort us? What if there's something else there? Oh, and you're right. Sorry. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so then Peterson, this one I'm pulling from the book, but Peterson quotes Nietzsche in saying, when you give up the Christian belief, for example, one thereby deprives oneself of the right to Christian morality. Christianity is a system, a consistently thought out and complete view of things. If one breaks out of it, a fundamental idea, the belief in God, one thereby breaks the whole thing to pieces. One has nothing of any consequence left in one's hand. Christianity presupposes that man cannot know what is good for him and what is evil. He believes in God, who alone knows. Christian morality is a command. Its origin is transcendental. It is beyond all criticism, all right to criticize. It possesses truth only if God is truth. It stands or falls on with the belief in God. If modern Westerners really do believe they know of their own accord, intuitively, what is good and evil, if they consequently think they no longer have a need for Christianity as a guarantee of morality, that is merely the consequence of the ascendancy of Christian evaluation and the expression of the strength and the depth of its ascendancy, so that the origin of the morality has been forgotten, so that the highly conditional nature of its right to exist is no longer felt. And essentially what he means here is, what if the function of religion was that it gave you a map, of how you should behave with yourself and others. It gave you a map of what to think, of how to regulate your emotions, of what to strive for, what to value as a human being. And if that is the case, as Nietzsche makes the claim here, that then science doesn't provide an answer for any of those. Science inherently destroys religion, and it has to, right? Because the whole point is it's trying to prove the objective world and what's actually happening. And our mythologies are based as though they happen in the real world. So science naturally has to say, hey, that didn't happen. There's absolutely no evidence for that. But at the same time, once it does that, it can only destroy it. It can't replace anything else. So then Peterson asks, well, what happens when you remove a system like that? A system that's necessary? Peterson makes a case, well, a vacuum occurs. So then what fills that vacuum? And here's where Peterson makes the point that it has to be another system. It has to be a system that can offer guidance to those domains that seems at least somewhat reasonable compared to the mythical, and that solves all the other problems. And this is where Peterson points out, that's an ideology. It's exactly what happens. An ideology comes in and takes over the position of religion because it functions the exact same way. It gives you a value structure. It tells you what's important. It tells you what you should do, and it tells you what to value. It frames the world in a certain way so that you can still act in the same way that religion gives you the same thing that a religion would have. So
he tells
go
the
ahead.
story of Tolstoy remembering the day that his faith was kind of replaced by science. And I think that, that illuminates what that vacuum really feels like, because it's easy. And I think that, we've all had the experience of sort of suddenly seeing myths or stories or fairy tales and just the superstitiousness of them and thinking that's nothing. Okay, that's nothing. We're going to replace that with nothing. And what Peterson is really offering here is maybe it's something. Maybe it offers you this map of how to behave, how to regulate your emotions. I love that he pulled that in here. Yeah, it's very well said.
So
and I'm sorry, one last thing. And other things can rush in to fill that vacuum too, right? And that's where he's laying out, the Soviet Union and just kind of the horrors of the 20th century. Lots of things can rush in to fill the gap. And they certainly did.
right, and that gives rise to another problem, and that's the problem that Nietzsche famously, in his speech of "God is Dead," notes. Well, it's not speech; it's a part of a book. But Claire, would you mind reading this one?
Yes, of course. Let's get into it. God is dead. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, "I seek God"? As many of those who do not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Why? Did he get lost? Said one. Did he lose his way like a child? Said another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Is he going on a voyage or emigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his glances. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continuously backward, sideward, forwards in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying as though through an infinite nothing? Did we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not night and more night coming on all the while? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the gravediggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? Gods too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, comfort ourselves? What was holiest and most powerful of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred game shall we have to invent? Is not the greatest of this deed too great for us? Must we know ourselves become God simply to seem worthy of it? Must we now ourselves become God simply to seem worthy of it?
And so, what does Peterson kind of ask? Well, what is he attempting to say here? What is he trying to say? And similar to the previous quote of Nietzsche, you can kind of see it, is that once there's a system that's established that has shaped so much of the norms of any culture, society, or community for generations and generations and generations, if you suddenly destroy the justification for that structure, you don't get to just get rid of that and be fine, because you don't even know what that structure is actually connected to. And for Nietzsche, he makes the point that's like, it's an entire system of even morality and value itself. The very reason and things that you care about, you believe that you care about them because of your religious tradition. So if you say you don't believe in the religion, but you still believe in the values, you're full of it, because your own religion, by your own admission, isn't true. So then why follow the values that this religion is supposed to espouse? And the consequence, as Nietzsche states, is we won't know what up from down is. We won't know what is valuable, what is not, what should be pursued, what shouldn't. This will make a lot more sense a little bit later once he gets into his own theory of how motivation works. But once we don't have something to aim for, we're lost. And so what's the effect of not having a value system, Peterson then questions? Is it just neutral? Do we just have we have nothing to aim for, so we hit nirvana, I guess, because we have no desires and no wants? And Peterson offers a different idea. He says, well, what if it's the case that your own conditions of living is naturally suffering? It's naturally to not feel like life is worth it, and you have to fight to make life worth it. I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the pandemic can probably feel this, right? We've all been locked up inside. Many of us probably had to destroy all our goals that we had for this year. Many of us have just been sitting here thinking and feeling like we're just wasting our life, right?
Yeah,
it's not neutral.
That we don't know up from down is such a great description of, I mean, it's just nihilism in its central form. I think, it makes me think too of, for those of you that are reading Outwitting the Devil on Mondays, that idea of just drifting, right? And I think there's, so much of us can identify with those periods in our lives, or even in our day, where we don't know up from down, and there isn't kind of a central aim that we know is such a key part of Petersonian thought.
Right. And it's the idea that if naturally life is suffering and it's not neutral, but instead by default negative, it may be the case that our ability to constantly strive for a goal is what actually makes our life bearable. And if for anyone who's come to the 12 rules for life, as we've discussed before, humans are weird beings in that they are much more motivated and feel much more excitement and happiness by a sensation of approaching a goal rather than accomplishing a goal. And in this theory of the system is what happens when you don't have a goal. It's like, well, then you can't get that sense of approach, that sense of accomplishment, which is naturally going to be very detrimental for your health.
And it's not logical, because you would think if you pause, you're just stopping, right? And Peterson says it's not neutral, right? That we think of it as just, okay, I've paused, I'm stopping, I'm not headed anywhere. But Peterson's making the point here that it's not neutral, it's really negative by default if we don't have that aim.
Right. And Peterson then makes the next point, which is we don't just lose our inaccurate claims of the mythology, but we also lose the justification and presuppositions for the behavior that the religion promoted as moral, right? Essentially, what was justified by the religion can't be justified if you don't even believe in the religion itself. And the strangest part here is that Peterson then points out that, so why is it that we still seek it out, even when they're really bad? Why is that, for example, the ideology of Nazism was able to take over Germany? Why were so many people willing to buy into that? And Peterson makes the point that it's like, well, because the alternative, and it's an alternative that you never have access to, that you almost never can even conceptualize, is chaos. Well, what is it about chaos that's so horrifying, that's so scary, right? What is it that right now we're in a split country where we have an election that's being debated, right? What is it that the other side fears so much about, that each side fears so much about the other side? What's that hidden part? And for Peterson, he kind of points out this idea of sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, I can say something because I do it.
Go ahead.
Which is that, setting this up, and I think this is it's controversial, and I think this is often interpreted incorrectly with Peterson, is it possible that any system is better than no system at all? And I think that's where you start to see this idea of like chaos versus Hitler, of an ordering of some sort is necessary because the alternative is chaos, and that's worse. And certainly there are ways to order better than others, but absolutely a system of belief is necessary, and that's not justification for anything, but it potentially helps us understand.
Right. And I've also heard him use an example that made it quite clear for me of Iraq, where he says, like, think of Saddam Hussein. It's like nobody exactly would be clamoring for how great of a dictator this guy was, right? Like, by all accounts, terrible person. What happens when you remove him? What would you expect to happen? It's like, oh, everyone would, liberty and freedom's coming there. What actually happens? Chaos. All structures decompose. Everyone starts to fight, and it's a power vacuum in the top, right? The structuring, even when it's brutal, provides some protection from provides some protection in the sense that it's a monopoly, right? So even in the brutal parts, that's why people seem to still have an appeal, a draw to things that normally we would assume they wouldn't have any draw to. And Nietzsche then points out, well, there seems to be a big problem here. We seem to need to have, like, to have no beliefs is to not be able to really live at all, because especially if you remember what Peterson's idea of belief is. Peterson's idea of belief is what you're acting out, not just what you think about you. Since he's a Jungian, he doesn't quite believe that you really have much access to the information about yourself. He doesn't think you really know what you actually believe. You just should look at your behavior to know what you actually believe. And the use of, and the idea is then, well, what is this belief system? What is this belief system that tells you how to act? And here's where Peterson gets into moral codes. He says it's a very strange and weird problem because every person, every family, every system, every community has a moral code. They all have expectations for behavior, but they're all different. The fact that there's a code means that it's necessary. There's never a place where there's not a code, or if there is a place where there's not a code, that's what you call chaos, right? Is where it's completely unpredictable and there's no rules. But at the same time, there doesn't seem to be any direct code that's required for a system to establish. And this is what he points out as Nietzsche's dilemma: is that humans have a fundamental need for morality, but there's no absolute morality that exists. So then, what is it that we should do? I already saw someone in the chat mention Nietzsche's solution. Later in the questions, we can get as to why both Jung and Peterson didn't see that as a viable solution. But Peterson then jumps to Jung as one of the possible solutions for the dilemma, because Jung points out that's like, hey, I think stories tend to constantly be in that moral domain. If anything, stories are just behavior being played out in such a way where we get to see how the behavior ends up. It's not just like, oh, if I just tell you a story and I'm like, oh, I went to the mall yesterday and end it there, it's a bad story. Why? Because you want to know how that behavior actually ended. What was the consequence of me going to the mall? If I tell you only the part that you could know right now, it's irrelevant. It's only because you want to know the consequences of that. And therefore it's like, okay, well, is there a commonality in stories? And it turns out there seems to be. And there seems to be because Peterson points out, it's like Hollywood exists. We can make constant, consistent stories that people will spend money to go see. They will sacrifice, their resources to go observe this thing. Well, what's the structure? What's common within it? What commonalities and morality do they have? We know there's differences in culture. Are there any commonalities throughout the cultures? Why would that be interesting? Why would that be important? And here's where Peterson's starting to try to find a path to resolve that initial problem that Nietzsche's pointed out.
This argument is so cool because it's like 3 points that just bounce off each other. This first one, with Nietzsche saying, okay, you have no life without morality, but there's no absolute morality. That, okay, we're screwed, right? Like that is, you can't fix that. And then boom, he goes into Jung and really tries to answer that with stories, and then really modernizes it in a way that we resonate with it. We know the parables that we were told as children. We understand what proverbial knowledge is. We empathize with these characters, and I think in this way he's offering this up really as a viable answer, because we've had the experience of extracting knowledge from stories, and what he's going to do there is say, okay, let's look at all these stories. Let's look at all the cultures, and where are there similarities? Are the morals similar? Because certainly the details of morality can vary from culture to culture, but is there anything that doesn't vary from culture to culture? And let's look at those. You're muted.
Sorry, he leaves that as Jung's approach, right? Jung's approach to narratives, and then takes a slightly different way to justify the same point, because he then says, look, Solzhenitsyn, for example, believed that the Nuremberg trials were one of the biggest moments of us as a species. And the reason, for those who don't know, is the Nuremberg trials were the trials that were held after World War II to hold the Nazis and several other people that were basically involved in the genocide accountable. Now, the biggest problem here, this isn't just a court system, is because technically they didn't break any laws. They were in Germany. They were following the orders of their own Führer, and they were a sovereign country. Why would they be susceptible? Like, what rules did they break? How do they get held accountable to anything? And what Solzhenitsyn was pointing out is like, look, the fact that the entire world seemed to, in a general sense, agree that, hey, putting people in prisons and then gassing them, no, it's just wrong. Like, it's like, we don't, no matter what your logical argument is, it's wrong. No matter what you could say about it, it's just wrong. It's a visceral emotional reaction of as a human being. There's the concept of crimes against humanity. It's essentially the crime against what it is and what it means to be human. And Peterson kind of points out that's like, well, here you have to ask yourself, is that true? Right? Because you could easily dismiss it. You can say, oh, these were just the people that won the battle, judging the people that lost. And that's all that's happening there, just a power exchange. Or if you do concede, it's like, no, there are certain actions that just by nature of doing them, you are doing something that is inherently wrong in some sense.
He also says it, he says, you cannot construct a moral code that enables genocide. It is just an ethical impossibility. And certainly, you know, there's ways you could talk your way around it or try to, but I think these, you know, these trials were one of the first times where crimes against humanity was, you know, we tried to lay a line in the sand.
And so then if you do agree at least with that claim, then Peterson kind of points out, you're starting to make a point towards at least a semblance of a moral claim of what things should be. And at this point, here's where he comes to a reconceptualization of morality. Peterson says, well, maybe it is the case that morality isn't a philosophy. That's not something explicit. It's not something we just think up of, or that it's a logical framework that we then operate as. Maybe it's something that's implicit. It's something that's within us. The morality is within us, that it arises from us. Well, okay, then how does it evolve if it comes from biological creatures? It's like, well, it seems to evolve on emotional creatures that produce it. It seems to be social creatures that need it, because if you were a soul, like by yourself, you don't need to have rules on how to act with anyone else or with anyone. You can just do whatever you want, right? As long as you're staying alive, you should have your morals. You don't need your morals. But what he then says is, because we're social animals, we're stuck dealing with each other. And therefore we have to create games that have reciprocity built within them. And for those who remember from 12 Rules, that game of the equilibrated state, that idea that we can make a game that everybody wins. And Peterson kind of points out, it's like, well, what kind of morals does that kind of foster? And it's like, well, one of them is the basic, simple premise of reciprocity: do unto others do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. And he says, like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean just like be nice to each other? It's like, no, that's not actually what it means ever. If you actually really think about what you're trying to say with that, what it means is, I want others to act in a way towards me that if I was doing something stupid, they would tell me. If I was doing something wrong, they would tell me in a nice way, in a way that wouldn't hurt me, in a way that was just information, right? I want the feedback. I want that if someone else knows something I don't, I want them to be able to tell me and help me, right? And flip it around, and you have the sense of reciprocity. You should act that way towards others. And that's when Peterson kind of says, like, the main thing we're looking for is feedback, because essentially the way you should act is distributed, because we are social animals. We pick up on social cues, and we're constantly paying attention to what others tell you. So then Peterson asks, if that's what defines how we should act, and he makes the example of, if you're a psychopath, you can still get along pretty well as long as you have friends, because no matter when your psychopath side starts to act out, other people will give you the feedback of like, what are you doing, dude? Don't, and that feedback automatically changes your behavior. So then the next question becomes, well, what commonalities do people have on their feedback? What is everyone trying to tell you? And is there something in common that they're all trying to tell you? And points out at the end, that's what stories are. Stories are that common sense of morality that the general average people are trying to convey. And that is Peterson's main points. For conclusion, we would like to go over just a couple of the questions. However, we will also put up these questions more. Should we put it more for up the original ones and then let people talk instead? That way. So we're just going to leave the questions, and I'm not claiming at all to have the right answers to this. These were just some of the main points, but more for the breakout groups, allowing everyone to kind of discuss their own perspective, their own opinions on what they got out of the lecture, what their opinions and thoughts of the arguments are, and what they think of Peterson's general idea that, well, several things. One, that as the religious structures collapse, so we also lose our capacity to have morality from that there isn't alternative ways to create morality. So just kind of opening the floor for all those things. But before that, I think we want to do questions, Shrikant.
Let's have Victor do his summarization,
Victor.
and then we will go to questions.
Right.
Let me just frame this up before we do bounce over here. Is like, we've said a lot, and this is, it's kind of deeply philosophical. And what we're trying to do here in kicking off the book is to set up this problem. And so what we've done with these key points, and Roger's done this brilliantly, is how can we summarize these as sort of a philosophical argument so that we can start to kind of trace his thought process and how that builds on itself, because we know that he certainly builds. And so I think that, if we can, in our conversations today, really try to understand this problem, that's going to allow us in the rest of the session to really dive into the solution and what that attempts to do. And the real, the magnum opus of that is Maps of Meaning. So Victor is going to take the floor over now to talk about the book, and really specifically how to think about the book going forward. And so I think that just to offer a segue here, that we're talking about the problem, we're really framing it up. And then, Peterson's going to take you on a journey to help make meaning out of it.
So before I hand it over to Victor, so Claire, what we will do is that we will go ahead after Victor is done talking about the book. Let's bring this slide up and go ahead and cut and paste these questions into the chat so people can take them with them in the breakout rooms. And we will read all those questions, because I want people, after Victor's kind of overview of the structure of the book, I want to come back to these points so that the breakout rooms focus on those questions. Great. But Victor, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. I've been introduced to Jordan Peterson a couple of years ago through his YouTube videos. Quite fascinated by all the ideas, and I wanted to go through the book, and I went through the book, and it's a very good book and very amazingly structured, as Shrikant was saying last week. It's amazingly structured in a way that, although it's kind of complicated, but if we go through it in a structured manner, it definitely will help us understand so many things. So from the things I would like to go through, not through the content, but just through the structure, how it is laid out. And a few quick facts. The book was written in 1999, and it took 15 years of Jordan Peterson's time. And he actually says he was pondering on these ideas all his life, and it took him 15 years to actually formulate his thoughts. And it's around 470 pages. Amazing images. You probably have seen these images in some of his lectures. And this book has been taught as a course in universities in 2015, 2017, and one earlier to that in Harvard, I think. I'm not completely sure. I've seen a couple of videos. And yes, we are discussing TVO series, and of course, there's a mistake there. It's TVO, not TiVo. And So I actually would like to focus on two things, preface and conclusion. So in preface, Peterson actually establishes what he would like to discuss, what problem he was grappled with. And then he concludes about it in his conclusion. And as Roger was alluding to in his, so when he was presenting, he was grappled with a couple of major questions, especially with religion and with the ideology. And in establishing these points, he actually picks up a lot of material from the existing material, from arts to religion to research to 20th century history and everything. I actually would like to focus on the kind of material he uses. And yeah, so the book itself has 5 major chapters, and of course I'm broad stroking the book. There's so much information, but majorly speaking, there are 5 chapters, and it follows a narrative. A narrative in a sense that it establishes few major points in each chapter, and the coming chapters builds upon the things that are established. And coming to the source materials, the kind of materials used here are research, philosophy and psychology, arts, literature, drama, paintings and sculpture, mythology, history, and his personal and professional experience. As a psychologist, he have seen so many patients, and he kind of sees all these patterns people are suffering with, and then he focuses on that one. And I just want to make a color coding on this one, and I'll put it over there. So each chapter uses all of this material, and as Roger was saying in his earlier hour, we as humans experience anything in our reality in both ways, object and meaning of it. And Peterson goes in detail how this happens in our world, and then he goes into discussing how our mind works, how our mind, in a sense, he actually goes deep into neurophysiology, and he goes into explaining how our brain works, left brain and right brain, and how we pick up things, and how we actually face explored and unexplored worlds, our own worlds. It could be a world as an objective world and our own world. And once this is done, and he moves into the idea of culture, now that we kind of have an idea about what an explored and unexplored territory is, and how cultures formed over history. Not a particular culture, but the idea that humans landed on the idea of culture, the idea of a protective structure around a few human beings, and how it is good, and how it is kind of bad, as in where it runs out of its limitations, and what exists outside of culture. Anything outside of culture can be seen as an anomaly, and how we as a culture react to that anomaly. So here he discusses the strange idea, and the stranger, how the strange manifests itself to a person or to a culture, and what are our reactions to that. And then in the 5th chapter, he talks about, as a person, what do we face, as in, so he introduces the idea of self-reference, self-consciousness, the consciousness, the waking up of our consciousness, and uses a lot of mythology, references to mythology, and then to the 20th century allegory, what happened, as Roger was talking about it, the Enlightenment era, and the waking up into science, and the science, the breakage of that affective, that mythological idea, and then leading us into the 20th century and the followed in 20th century. And then he concludes all of these ideas in his conclusion. This is his personal take and personal conclusion to all the things that he has seen. And this is how the book is structured. And this is really a broad stroke, and there is so much of information and so much to discuss. And yeah, if anyone's interested in reading the book, I hope this helps.
Well, thank you very much, Victor. All right, let me give you my quick take on the book. Not on the book itself, but what we are trying to do here, how we have structured this. We want to make it easy for anybody to explore what Jordan Peterson is saying in this book. So we are doing it at multiple levels. Number one, at the lowest level, you can just come to the meetup. And Roger and Claire do a brilliant job of putting forth the entire idea of what is being said in that lecture. You can just do that. You can and listen to that, engage with that. That's one level. Level number two, there is a video. It's only 28-minute video. I didn't know that Jordan Peterson could do short videos. I was stunned to see how short the videos were. Those are only 28 minutes. I invite you to go to the second level and watch the video, think about it, and come. You'll get much more value out of it. Level number three, read the book. Okay. Now, the thing that I want to say about the book is that it is the most beautifully structured book I have seen. I love books. I read many, many books. The thing I love about this book is summaries. He gives one-page summary of the entire book at the end of the preface. And for each of the 5 chapters, he starts by summarizing the entire chapter in less than a page. And each of the subsections are summarized within a paragraph. And he recommends, and I recommend, that you just read through the summaries first. So you get a complete bird's eye view of the entire book, his entire argument, all the problems, key problems he's setting forth, all the key possible solutions that he's putting forth. I've never seen a structure like this for a book. So that's the third level. Okay, read the book. Fourth level, we've just launched a Reddit. Please go ahead and interact. Pose your questions, put your thoughts forth so that we can engage in this before the lectures and after the lectures. All right, so these are the 4 levels of engaging. Now let's come back to the points that Claire and Roger had put forth on the table. Claire or Roger, could you briefly just read through this? And that's what we are going to discuss in breakout rooms. And then we'll come back in this large group to share takeaways. Go ahead, Claire and Roger, over to you.
I'll start. So first key points. Number 1, how did our adaptation of empiricism change how we approached religion and religious thought? Number 2, what functions did religion serve for humans besides being an inaccurate story of events? Number 3, what fills the void to replace the function of what was once religious in nature? 4, why is a belief structure a requirement? 5, how are religious presuppositions and morality linked? 6, what is the dilemma that Nietzsche points out? 7, what is Jung's approach to that dilemma? 8, what did the Nuremberg trials possibly signal a move in the right direction? And lastly, why does Peterson reconceptualize morality?
All right, folks, I recommend you copy these questions and take them with you in the breakout rooms. Give chance for everybody to speak about these things so that one person doesn't dominate the conversation. You want to hear from everybody, and then we'll come back into this main room and share our takeaways. I'm starting the breakout rooms now. All right, welcome back, everybody. Okay, so Roger and Claire, I was just thinking of doing takeaways. I want to hear people's take on the book, what they feel about. So talk about, you know, are you planning to read the book? Are you planning to watch the videos? What's your impression? This is a long journey. It's about 12, how many meetups? Around a dozen meetups. And we are going to really dive into it in great amount of detail. This is really the core of Jordan Peterson's thought. So I'll just go around and you can tell me what your thoughts are, what your takeaways are from this meetup. What do you look forward to in terms of this Maps of Meaning discussion? Try to keep it brief, about a minute or two. So I'm just going to call on people as I see them on the screen. So it's going to be Tibin, David Roller, and Jean first. Tibin, go ahead. You're on mute. Just a second. Wait a minute. I just want to make sure the settings are correct. Yes, Tibin, go ahead. Now you can unmute yourself.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. No, this was really eye-opening. I think I'm glad to find like-minded people. I've watched a lot of the lectures, mostly like the personality series and the Maps of Meaning lectures, but I didn't have the, I guess, the structure to try to dive into the book because I did notice it was complicated, but this is getting more confidence. I'm gonna try to start, and it'll be fun to discuss things. I think we already made some good points and had good discussions already. Yeah, what else did you want us to talk about? Or
no, that's it. That's
okay.
That's good.
Just, yeah,
appreciate what were your impressions? Yes,
yeah,
David.
No,
yeah, David, Jean, and Sam. David.
Yeah, so I've watched a lot of his videos, and I had intended to get the book and start reading it. So the meetup now has accelerated my time frame now. Instead of putting it off to the future, I think I'm going to bring it in and start reading the book now.
Okay, Roger and Claire, how about giving people a break? Next Thursday is Thanksgiving anyway, so let's not do a meetup on Thanksgiving. So you have 2 weeks to acquire the book and start reading it.
Excellent.
There will be a quiz.
There are going to be quizzes every time.
If anything, it's perfect because this first one just kind of gives you a general framing for what the book is trying to aim at. So
let me ask one question to Roger. Roger, you're very familiar with the videos and the book. What is the correspondence between the videos and the book?
So different videos have different correspondence, but this is kind of his generalized. Essentially, he gives a course, a lecture on this. The TVO videos are
those are the ones that we are using. Yeah,
those are the ones we're using, but they're shortened versions of a lecture. As if you can't tell, you can kind of see him talking, and then suddenly there's a cut and he disappears to the other side. That's because I know you said that it's like Jordan Peterson in a short video. It's like, nah, they edited him into a short video. That's not the same thing. Like, he was, God knows what else he said during that lecture, but they edited him for TV to kind of keep his idea. But I felt it was a good way to kind of provide, like you said, those different layers where if all you want to do is just get a general idea of what's the main point of this book, you can show up and we'll just go over that real quick lecture, and that gives you just the main points, but then giving also that depth and pulling in from the book to allow us to also dive really deep to anyone who's interested in that aspect of it. But I would definitely say, even just with the arguments we were giving here, the amount of depth that Peterson goes into in the book is way, way higher. So if you're a fan of checking your work, some people just want to be like, okay, what's this guy's point? Others want to be like, okay, how did you get there? Why are you saying this? Who are you quoting? There's much more depth that me and Claire are definitely not able to cover here just for sheer length of time. But I definitely encourage it to anyone who's interested in that.
And all the future events there'll be meetup groups that Jerkant makes, and then we'll post the video there. We're just going to go in order, as well as the corresponding chapters that we'll try to cover during that time. So follow the Meetup group closely.
And folks,
I
you can
could just
also
add-
write whatever you want on this Reddit. I'm going to create for each of the lectures. I'm going to create a post. You can also post on it, so we can put some discussion over there. You can raise questions. You can do follow-up discussion over there, so we can continue. Have this. It doesn't have to end with the meetup. It can, you can do stuff after the meetup, before the meetup, and we'll figure out a way of pulling all of that into the meetups as well. All right, folks. Okay,
just
so go ahead.
So there is, if you go to YouTube, there is a Jordan Peterson channel. And if you subscribe to his channel, you can gain access to a lot of other videos. Some of them are much more in depth. They're like over an hour or 2 hours.
Sure. Thank you. Next up is, go ahead.
I was just say, yeah, and I definitely recommend them to anyone who really wants to go in depth, because the book with longer videos really helps break down the full theory. But we didn't want to do it because it was too much of a time commitment for some people. So
yeah, and the way in which we do these meetups is that we want the material to be accessible to anybody. At the same time, if you show up just as a kind of a curious human being, you should be able to derive value out of it. And even if you have read the book 12 times, we want you to walk away with something. So that's the range that we're trying to achieve. Next one is going to be Jean, Brian, and Paul S. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, so I got my book here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm very excited because last time through the 12 rules, I really finished that book. I have so many books, I have a hard time to finish them. So I'm very excited to join this discussion to finish this book. And this week is very interesting because religion have always been something I'm interested, because I'm not religious, but I'm not totally atheist. So since I come to America like 20 years ago, I joined different churches. I really like the atmosphere, but I just cannot believe in God somehow. And then I went to Buddhism and all this. Anyway, so I understand why, we have so many people are so materialized. I don't get satisfaction just through material purchase. That's why I keep searching this, but I couldn't find anything. Actually, 52 living ideas, the closest thing I found,
Okay.
which can like spiritual pursuit instead of religion, because all these things, I found a lot of people go to Buddhism, Christian, they don't really search for the answer. All they do is like, one funny thing, I went to a lecture at the Buddhism, and they said, if you want to money, you read this mantra. If you want health, you read that mantra. It's like, what is it about? So nobody cares about the truth. All they care is like, get more things, through the religion. So I'm glad, looking forward to this. Thanks, Roger and Claire. Very excited.
Wonderful. Jean, that was a great point. I think all of us need philosophy because religion was the first version of philosophy. And when that went away, people thought that, okay, you don't need anything. No, you do need kind of core set of ideas, core set of values, core sets of beliefs to guide yourself. Okay, Sam, sorry I skipped you. Sam, you're next.
That's okay. My copy of Maps of Meaning is right over there on my bookshelf, and this is definitely accelerated. I think this is going to help me to sort of get to it. I read the introduction, and it's just dense, and I'm a slow reader, so it's hard for me to, I really have to kind of be alert and stay with it. And but it is, I know that it's just something that I feel like I'm going to benefit so much from. So. And this group is great. That's why I'm back after a while, and it was something that it was just a great opportunity. So I'm glad to be back here. Hopefully I can keep with everybody.
Well, it's wonderful to see you back.
Yeah,
Welcome.
It's good to see you too.
Welcome back. Next up is Brian, Paul S with the butterfly, and Aaron. Brian.
So I'm new today, and this is great. I will read the book and follow the group.
Excellent. Welcome. And welcome, Brian. Now the other Brian.
This one.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, after watching the videos today, I decided to read chapter 1 of the book. I read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. It's difficult, but you've not got a background in this area. But the other thing I would say is I noticed a comment in the chat which says that 12 weeks is adventurous to cover all of this in 12 weeks, which I think, having read a little bit and listened to the videos, I would agree with. It's going to take some effort to get through it, I think. Nevertheless, I'm looking forward to it. And
yeah, Brian, I mean, these kind of subjects like Carl Jung, people study for life. You know, human consciousness is a very complicated thing. Coming up with philosophy of what do you do with the advent of, you know, science? How do you rechange your? It's going to take more than 12 weeks to figure it out, and we'll work, but we'll make some progress in 12 weeks. Next up is Paul S., Aaron, and Natalia.
Yeah, thanks, Srikant. Yes, I conferred with my butterfly, and what we've decided is, well, my takeaway is the more a person's religious view includes, or the religion itself, things that are amenable to scientific verification, like the earth is 6,000 years old or something, the more of a conflict there is, which makes me wonder why in the 1900s, Buddhism just didn't take over the world, because that isn't in there as much as Buddhism. And there isn't a conflict that Jordan Peterson talks about, because there's not as many things that are like, this happened. So those are my thoughts as of now.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Let's go to Paul S. without the butterfly.
I don't know if I should, because anyway. Yes, I have book. Yes, I read it. I think I really like Jordan Peterson, but some of the opinions, especially regards to neuroscience, it's 20-year-old book. So regards to neuroscience, we definitely got farther in the last 20 years. Regards the philosophy of consciousness, we definitely got farther than that. But for majority of the people, it is a very important book to read. And I really admire Rogers and Claire that they started with that, because it's very difficult book for many, will be very difficult book for many people, and I really admire them. I admire you, Srikant, and I do understand the book. I do understand Jung, Nietzsche, and Peterson. So for me, it is just refreshment. But good luck to everybody.
Wonderful. It's always wonderful to have you, Paul. And great point about the fact that, you know, neuroscience actually is going through a golden age. So there is just tremendous stuff that has happened. You know, even week after week, you know, new things are being discovered. It's an incredible thing. So anybody who is familiar with it, if you know, if you would like to pipe in and add things as you go along, we'd really appreciate that. Next up is Aaron, Natalia, and Marisa.
Yeah, I read the book like a couple months ago. I don't think it's as hard as people make it seem. He wrote the book back in 1999, and I actually think that he's much more polished in the way he presents his ideas now than he was when he originally wrote the book. I think that he gives us like a good look into the source material and some of the mythology and some of the even folk tales, I think, in some chapter that he refers to. And I think those anecdotes and those stories in themselves are very interesting to kind of see where exactly Peterson draws, you know, where exactly he's inspired from. Again, guys, just pace yourself and like just read the chapter you know, as it corresponds to the Thursday meetup. If you're not a big reader or you're a little like intimidated by it, but you know, there might be parts that you don't understand everything. And I always tell people it's better to read a book in its entirety and understand 70% of it than not to read it at all. So, you know, I think that's just a little helpful piece of advice for people who are reading something that they find slightly intimidating.
Thanks. And especially because what we are trying to do is that we are going to have these multi-level things. You can watch the video. Roger and Claire will give their own take, and then there will be discussions of it in the breakout room. You can ask whatever questions you have. And you can discuss it on Reddit. So it's like you have the multiple ways of getting at the book. So next up is Natalia, Mariza, and Jairo.
All right, so I'm on my daughter's Zoom today. Hence
What's your name?
My name's Alden.
Alden.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I got on to Meetup for the first time in 8 years today. Happened to find this group and signed up this morning. So it's really cool to see. So I've gotten into Jordan Peterson, like many of you, through YouTube. Just really drawn to his work. I think that I found him somehow through what I've read and found through Yuval Harari, *Sapiens* and *Homo Deus*. And likewise, he brought up philosophical points of, hey, we have all the science, but we don't have the philosophers or moralists to actually tell us how to use this well. And without that, what are we doing? And that was kind of part of the big question he asked. And I think that's a big reason why I was drawn to Peterson, because he's always dancing around that, always. And I think that it's very provocative the way that he goes on to ask the questions and pull us in. So I'm really excited to be part of the group. I haven't gotten the book yet because, again, I just found you guys today, but this is inspiring as is. I'm excited to be here.
Welcome, Alden. Next up is Mariza, Jairo, and William.
So I have not previously read this book. I am very familiar with Jordan Peterson and many of his philosophies, however. So I'm really excited to go down this road with all of you. I am going for the platinum experience. I have the book, I have the Audible, and I intend to watch all the videos. I will say the 30-minute video was just like a tease. He has lectures that are just much longer, and they're more what I'm used to for Jordan Peterson. So I'll probably be doing both. A note on the Audible book, it is narrated by him, which is kind of cool because he's got this nice stage presence voice. So if anyone's interested, I will say that I believe that, so I've only read the preface thus far, and already he's made me stop and call myself a liar. So I think that bodes well for my growth experience going forward here as I get further into the book. Thanks.
Wonderful. And Victor was pointing out the audiobook, the entire book is only 30 hours. And if you're already listening, if you're already used to listening to Jordan Peterson's voice, maybe that works for you. So whichever one, but I do, yeah, go ahead.
I just also want to add to that. You guys could always do what I did, which was sign up for the 1-month trial of Audible, get 1 free book, and then cancel. So just letting that know that that's a possibility.
Okay, excellent. Next up is Jairo, William, and Joe. Jairo.
Yes, I listened to the lecture at 1.5 speed on YouTube. So trying to get through it before this presentation started. I didn't get quite through it, but I was impressed by his ways and how young he looks there. And he managed to write that book in 99, and it took him 15 years to bring it together. So he must have been a teenager when he started, I imagine. I don't know what it looks like because he looks pretty young. But what I get from what I got in the presentation and listening to him is, it sounds like, well, I'm coming up with assumptions. Like it sounds like he's gonna try to come up with a sort of a universal moral structure based on the collective unconscious, like we have throughout all different cultures, all these stories, and maybe he's going through all of them and trying to pull out what's universal and come up with a moral structure that could be used to dominate the whole world if it comes to that we have to have a world government or something that's equitable for everyone. That's kind of my prediction of what he's going after, but we'll see.
All right, well, we'll see. He is already, it's not a mystery, Jairo, so you can find out what happens. Next up is William, Joe, and David Miller. William?
Yes, I think I'll finally be able to finish the Maps of Meaning book after a number of failed attempts. The short video really helped. because it corresponds with the chapter. I know some of the longer videos, he just goes off on a tangent. And I think with Roger and Claire explaining things, and Shrikant, how you explained how to read the book and how it's structured, and I wasn't aware of that. And that's very helpful. So I'm looking forward to this series. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, William. Next up is Joe, David Miller, and Dave. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to the series as well. This is something that I'm very appreciative of Roger and Claire for bringing us through 12 rules prior to this, because I think that actually gave us a nice structure and as to how we can read this much easier. And I think that this is just getting used to Jordan Peterson and the way he approaches problems and, you know, his philosophies and explaining things. It's going to make things a lot easier than it normally would have been if you just jumped right into Maps of Meaning. So I appreciate that. You know, Victor did convince me in the breakout room that, you know, to leave behind Mortimer Adler's approach to how to read a book on this and maybe go cover to cover. So I think it is more of a textbook like book. So I think that would probably be advisable for me personally. I know that, or maybe I could read the summaries.
No, I have to tell you, Joe, that Jordan Peterson recommends in the book itself, in the preface of the book, he recommends Mortimer Adler's way of looking at the book, because he actually asks you to read the summaries first.
Okay.
That's how you start. That's what he recommends. And I recommend that too. So
okay.
But I wanted to say that, you know, I think Roger and Claire have done just bang up job on this. This is just incredible how, you know, how well they are able to kind of put things together. I really love the presentation. So I think they're making it easy for everybody. So really appreciate that. Next up is David Miller, Dave, and Laura.
Yes, well, hello. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. And so I think this is absolutely fantastic that we've got Zoom and I can now participate. So it's tremendous. The only problem, of course, is that we've got a 16-hour time zone difference with New York. So actually, I'm talking from tomorrow, actually. Okay, that's all I wish to say. All right, thank you.
Okay, you can always tell us what the future is going to be like. You see it first. Next up is Dave, Laura, and Camille. Dave?
Thanks, Shrikant, and thanks, Roger and Claire, for leading, and Victor for your outline. It was very helpful. I'm going to be a level 2. I'll do the videos. I'm wading through the book. I'm up to about 100 pages. And Shrikant, if you said it was easy, are you reading the Urdu or the Sanskrit version? Could I maybe borrow that if that's easy?
No. This is it.
You're doing English. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, I look forward to a great voyage. And you're right, Jordan was very young in these videos. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Next up is Laura, Camille, and Arjun. Laura?
I have not read the book. I'm very much interested in it. A little bit, I don't know, afraid to even start. It's been very interesting listening to these folks. Well, anyway, I'm going to get started on it as soon as I can.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Next up is Arjun and Stephen. Camille.
Hi, I haven't read the book yet, but I read Carl Jung's Like Daughters works as a grad student. I'm a licensed therapist, so I just love all this stuff, and I particularly like anyone that's, you know, considering those Jungian archetypes in their writing. So I am looking forward to reading it and seeing how it goes. I just kind of read a brief synopsis of it, so it looks very interesting. So I'm excited to see what the rest of the series has in store.
Wonderful. Talking of Jung, we're starting a new series called Practical Jung. That's going to be on Sundays at 2:30 p.m. every other Sunday. Aidan Moore is going to be interviewing a whole range of authors on Jung, authors who have written about Jung, Jungian psychologists, to see how to apply Jung's ideas in your life. So, if you're interested in Jordan Peterson, if you're interested in Jung, please join us. And it's starting this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. All right. Next up is Arjun, Wade, and Tanya. Arjun. Arjun, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, the Maps of Meaning book. I read that a few years ago, actually, initially. And I just started recently reading it again. And so this series really, the timing of it is really good. I started reading, just got to chapter 2. So the timing of this is really good for me to help going through it again. And I was interested in a lot of the other people that Peterson, like Jung, Nietzsche, and also Iliada as well, who's also mentioned in this numbers of the video. So it's just going to be good to help my understanding
Wonderful.
of the book.
Thank you, Arjun. Welcome. Next up is Stephen, Wade, and Tanya. Stephen.
Yeah, I read Maps of Meaning a while ago. I couldn't read it. It's too difficult. So I got the audiobook. I highly suggest that. Listen to the audio, read as you need. I think that we're lucky because I think Jordan Peterson, we may never have heard of this book if it hadn't been for all the political hoopla created over the gender pronouns in Canada. And suddenly Jordan became a giant figure. But, I used to be into Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was the guy who translated Jung for me. And Jordan Peterson kind of has taken it over and approached it more of a practical level because of his family therapy. And I thought that was a wonderful application, how Jordan Peterson is. Just as a little insider, anybody here that's a member of Audible can send another person a copy of a book for free as a gift. And I've sent out several books until Audible wouldn't let me do it anymore. And even if you're an Audible member, you can receive a book for free. So you may want to hook up with people who have subscriptions and who don't and pass along the books, or you can do the 1 month free thing as well. I want to bring up one more thing. You mentioned, Shrikant, about the latest neuroscience. A lot of people may know this. There's a guy named Stuart Hameroff and another guy named Roger Penrose. They've kind of come together. And it seems to me that, like, we've talked in small groups, and Claire and Roger, wow, you guys always make things so beautiful. Roger, it's so good to have you back, dude. But, myth came from and could be passed down through epigenetic code. That's a possibility. But Stuart Hameroff, it says that in our neurons, there are things called microtubules. And there's actually a quantum thing going on inside those microtubules, which indicates that, in fact, he argues that in quantum mechanics, the observation.
Stephen, let's not go too much into this.
Okay, that's okay.
To take people's takeaways on Maps of Meaning right now.
Right, but you mentioned something about neuroscience. So Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose.
Sounds
if you
good.
Want to go there. Thank you. And bye.
Absolutely, and we will weave that in as we go along.
Okay.
Next up is Wade, Tanya, and Stefan. Wade?
Hey guys, I'm a guest here. I think it was referred from TO Philosophy or something like that, but I'm up in Canada. And I looked at the video. Jordan, from Canada and the whole gender thing. He's an interesting guy. And I don't know if I can summarize the Meaning Maps as an interesting title. I had to step away. I'm doing 2 book studies right now, but I step away because I was doing another book study right now. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get around to this book. It'll most likely be the videos, but I was just here to kind of understand and maybe discuss next time when I have more time and not doing something else. But yeah, I didn't know he had a Jungian flavor, so I'll have to see, kind of read into that and see where that comes out. And I was just talking to Roger there, but I just wondered why you brought it up. I don't know if this was consistent to other 52 Living Ideas. I don't even know what your group is about. So
Well,
I'm kind of going blind here.
Wonderful. So you can go ahead and I'm going to put a link to the 52 Living Ideas calendar. We cover a whole range of things. And Jung has been the biggest influence in terms of kind of the psychology, on kind of psychological thought. I think he's been a biggest influence on Jordan Peterson. And that's why, and he keeps coming back to Jung in many, many different ways. So there's a very close connection. Next up is Tanya, Stefan, and Yi. Tanya?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I haven't read the book yet, but I'm looking into it. Yeah, that's
okay.
it.
Next up is Stefan. Skip. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, I did not see it. Next up is Joel, Pegor, and Bowden. Joel.
Thanks, Shrikant, and thanks, Victor, Claire, Roger, and everybody who puts up with me in the breakout groups. I haven't read the book. I haven't watched the videos, but I tend to come in here and poach ideas whenever I can, because they're all good ideas. They're wonderful presentations, and you meet wonderful people, even from our colonial cousins. So thank you very much. Whether I'll read the book is doubtful, but I may find time for some of the videos. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Next up is Pegor, Bowden, and Julie. Pegor?
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys, Shrikant, Claire, Roger, and Victor for presenting today. Yeah, I still haven't gotten the book. I'm gonna buy it and hopefully get to here soon. I did watch the video, and I do intend to watch all the videos. I also want to finish the personality series videos because we skipped some of them. And yeah, looking forward to the big guns of Peterson.
Thank you, Pegor. Next up is Bowden, Julie, and Jeff G. Bowden? Okay, next up is Julie.
Okay, 4 sentences I think I can do it in. I've been a long time trying to find my internal GPS and eradicate this fear-based reactive way I've been living for 40 years. And kind of been like a drifter seeking truth in a world where people tell me I think too much. And I've also suspected that clarifying my values for myself, taking a look, doing that self-inquiry would be very, very valuable for me. And to have found this interactive place is so stimulating. And I'm really glad you're adding this Reddit, because I don't present so well verbally. I do much better with time and writing. So I just, it's more just the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you.
Thank you.
I haven't been able to talk. Can I talk?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
I found this meeting very valuable, and the presentations were really good, Roger and Claire. I like that, and I like the video. This is much better than the 12 steps. I found that book to be very didactic. This one is much more fundamental, and it answers the question of his beliefs and how he gets his main messages. What I don't know, and at this point, I'd like to look at the summaries. I'd like to look at the whole complex and not get bogged down in each illustration. There's many illustrations of one single point or message. And I fear that each lesson will just go over an illustration, as opposed to getting into a total complex understanding of the system and the complexities, because a lot of this is disjointed. Like a lot of Peterson's stuff is disconnected. Now, I like the fact that he starts with the meaning crisis, which is very fundamental. And I found that to be fascinating. A good review of Nietzsche, which I haven't seen. So that in itself was inspiring. What I fear that I'm going to lose the forest for the trees, and the trees might be too dense, and we might not be able to do comparative philosophy and psychology and application to contemporary living. So that's just my comment, but I think this series is the best that I've seen in a long time on the internet.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Borden. Great comments. I think Jordan Peterson's mind is a very unusual mind. It is a mind that kind of goes exploring, but at the same time, I think he keeps coming back to kind of core themes. So in one sense, he goes, all over the place into multiple examples all the time. But he keeps coming back to that. And I think Roger and Claire are doing a very good job of kind of focusing on the key themes. So I think we're going to be all right.
Okay, that's
yes.
good. That's inspiring.
Next up, thank you, Borden. Excellent comments, though. Next up is Jeff G, Mike, Magical, and Judith. Jeff G?
Yeah, I agree with Bowden. This is a lot. Actually, he's not the first to bring up the crisis of meaning, of course, but he might be one of the few to really stick with it all the way. He's promised that he's gonna put meaning back into modern life, and that's certainly worth listening to. I'm actually a book reader, so I really am going to try and read the book. But if interest flags, I guess I'll retreat to the videos, especially if they're only 28 minutes each. That'll be nice. One thing that's interesting is that I really like the singer George Ainsley, who basically combines psychoanalysis and behaviorism. And so now I've got to I like the fact that he's bringing in all these different sources, because that makes, it's going to make it interesting at the very least, but that'll potentially be more unifying, right? Everyone's going to have a favorite among these things, and if he hits, half dozen different sources, then one of them is going to be one that will bring you in, and so it might produce some kind of unity.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Next up is Judith. Let me see. Sorry, I missed. I think. Okay, let's start with Judith. Judith, followed by Stefan. Judith, go ahead.
Yep. So I love the presentation that Roger and Claire gave. Very interesting, and I look forward to coming every week. I'm going to do that. I will watch the short videos. Actually, I was wondering if the longer videos I've seen, just since you introduced me only a few weeks ago to Jordan Peterson, actually, and I've watched his longer lectures, and I like them. So if you could provide the associated long lectures that go with these weeks, that would be helpful for me. It's easier to listen. I want to get the book. I don't know how much I can read the book, but I will want to read it over the long term. I just don't know if I can keep up with it week to week. That's about it. Thank you so much. I really am enjoying.
Thank you, Judith. Next up is Stefan, followed by Mike. Stefan?
Yeah, so Shrikant, I was just thinking about something you just said a minute ago about how Jordan Peterson seems to circle around a series of ideas until it comes to a focal point. And I like that a lot because from listening to him, I would say so far my idea of what that central idea would be the idea that we've discussed a lot, which is confronting the dragon and getting gold. Like, that's very symbolic, and you could apply that to maybe all areas of your life, possibly. So I find this book interesting because symbolism embedded within multiple cultures, similarly to how that idea of the dragon, you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this, kind of order and chaos. I think meaning kind of captures it for me. I think that's why this is called Maps of Meaning, because that's like the path along which you are trying to confront the dragon as much as you possibly can, while keeping the order or kind of reasonable touch with the order. Next up is going to be Mike, Kevin, and Yan Fei. Mike?
Hi. As Jordan Peterson defines civilization's crisis of meaning, and he does a pretty good job of it. However, he said at the end, he says the proof is left to the student. He's not going to tell you how to get there. So in order to get there, you have to apply what you've said some time ago with several. What this is all about is Adler's How to Read a Book. And Adler's How to Read a Book is how to write your own book out of all the pieces. And some of the pieces, there's a remarkable crisis of similarity, meaning in Ayn Rand, Philip Wiley, Yuval Harari, how the mind works. You mentioned Penrose, The Emperor's New Mind was mentioned here, as to how the mind works. And you put it all together and you write your own book. You might be able to do it in Marathi because you're doing this without as many preconceived notions. When you turn it upside down into that, well, the best I can do is implicitly write it in English. I've kind of already got the answer, but I'm sure everybody will agree with it. But I won't be able to explain it. So I'll go away after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I mean, I think this is one thing that is kind of unique about Jordan Peterson, is that he has a profound respect for the individual, and that individual actually writes their own book. They write their own life. They write their own meaning. They write their own story. And that's really, it's what this is all about. You can take in other stories, but you're actually writing your own story. Next up is Kevin, Yanfei, and Jyoti. Kevin?
Thank you, Claire and Rogers and Victor and 52 Living Ideas. I'm going to read more, watch more, and learn more. I got a book. I would refer to, please read the preface. It's very good. He been a university, then he got, said, I was taught people were motivated by rational force. Human beliefs and actions were determined by economic pressure. It makes sense for ordinary people, but he questioned. So I'm starting to question that too. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Yanfei, Jyoti, and Sanjay.
So I think I am going to read this book. I'm planning to order it tonight. It's interesting for me because for a very long time, I was solidly in the Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris camps of God is not great and the end of faith. And it's only been recently, due to the polarization of our national discussion or lack thereof, that I've been thinking, oh, maybe they're trying to fill a hole, and maybe that's the hole left behind by religion. And then I came to this and I was like, wow, this is exactly what he's talking about. So now I'm pretty excited to read his book. I also have a suggestion / question. So I've watched his debate with Sam Harris, which I think it was like 2 parts. It went on. And I'm curious whether we might be able to incorporate that into this series, maybe at the end of the series.
That's a good, good thought. But what we want to do is, we've discussed that in our meetups, and it's certainly a core issue. But I think Jordan Peterson's position of it will be explicated fully. What we want to do is that this is complicated enough, like Jordan Peterson's position is complicated enough, and he contrasted to various people in order to present it. So let us hear his case out, and then maybe after this is done, maybe we'll do one meetup on that. It's a very good idea. It's something that is both these people are giants, and they are able to talk about their differences in a very open and direct way. And it's a very good example of, great communication. So, but let's do that after this series. Next up is Jyoti, Sanjay, and Marco. Jyoti?
Yeah, hi. Claire and Roger, you did a great job in summarizing everything for me. I did see the video, and it seemed like he was hoping to get the religion back. He felt that the religion had collapsed. And I want to hear more about it. I can't read the book, Shrikant. I have a lot of commitments during the daytime. I'm involved in a lot of projects, and I can squeeze some time to see the videos. But I'll get the book. I will read it. Especially interested because religion for me has a different meaning. It has given me faith, but the religion does not have that meaning as religious people have. So I would like to, proceed further with this and see how my stand changes from time to time or doesn't change as I go along with this. So thank you. I'll probably be able to come back, but not sure if I can read the book.
Wonderful. I mean, in connection with this, I want to say one thing. You should definitely use, I recommend everybody to use the ideas from How to Read a Book in order to read this book. If any book really needed it, is this one. Because you have to understand, like most of us are very familiar with Jordan Peterson's ideas. We have listened to so much of it. And this is actually the most explicit version of those ideas. So even if you have not read parts of this book, you have those ideas because you've heard so much of Jordan Peterson. Okay. So what I suggest is that go through the summaries, read just summary of the book, which is 1 page, plus summary of every chapter. So first pass is just read summary of the whole book, 1 page. Second pass, read that summary again and read the summary of the 5 chapters, total of 6 pages. Then again, read the summary of the book, summary of the chapter, and summary of all the subchapters. That's maybe total of about 12-page or 15-page material, okay? That's going to give you an overall picture. Now, once you have the overall picture, dive in where you think you are most interested in, because you have the context to understand most of what he's saying. Explore whatever you think, whatever subsection, whatever chapters you find most fascinating, to see that in his full context. So if you do not have time to read the book completely, you can go and dive in like an eagle. You just fly up, you look at where the potential value is, you dive in there, get whatever you can, fly up again. So that's what I would recommend if you have difficulty reading. Okay. Next up is Sanjay and Mark.
Thank you.
Yes, so I have watched many of Peterson's normal lecture videos, the hour and a half long plus ones, and I really enjoy those. Those are the ones that I'm familiar with, and I have gotten a lot out of them. I will also continue watching the short form videos, but this first one that I watched, I didn't think was as helpful. It was a synopsis, but I think it left out. I could tell it was edited, so it did leave out some things. But still, I'll continue watching both. For the book, I will likely get the book, but again, I mean, as Jyoti said, I am not sure how much I'll be able to read it. But what you just said right now, Shrikant, helped. So maybe I will read the excerpts, the introductions, and then dive into the areas that are more interesting. And I may also go on Reddit, although I'm not a big social media person, but I may go there and check it out.
Excellent. Thank you, Sanjay. Next up is Marco.
Yeah, I discovered Peterson through this meetup, and I'm definitely became a fan. And I have Maps of Meaning on Audible, and yeah, I basically listen to it every once in a while, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming series.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marco. So now over to Claire and Roger. Any closing thoughts?
I'm grateful. I'm very excited to see new faces and just hear from all of your voices. So Godspeed to you in your reading. And I'm excited to kick this off and great to have you back, Roger.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm just happy to be back. I'm really excited to take this on. I hope me and Claire can kind of make it at least somewhat easier, or at least provide a different perspective that might make it easier to consume. But yeah, essentially just really excited to keep going and see where this goes.
Wonderful. Roger, it's wonderful to have you back. Claire did a bang up job, by the way. She did amazing job on the personalities. But
I watched a couple on YouTube.
But I think this and I think the way in which you're approaching the book so far, this book, it's at a completely different level than even your 12 rules presentations. And I think the material here is deep enough that we can get just tremendous amount of value from it.
Yeah, because essentially the way I was trying to approach it was taking the main points of the chapter and seeing how, or of the lecture, and seeing how they all kind of interconnect, and then trying to show how they connect, but then not getting too in the weeds about each one of those points. So just kind of showing the general structure of the argument without getting too into it, because anyone who read the book already got that information anyway. So anyone who's interested in that can, but anyone who wants to know the general argument can also just watch this or the lecture.
Yeah, and I think that the attendees that we have are incredible, because what that does is that it just provides these kind of range of questions and just feedback and comments, which is actually a dream for somebody who's presenting, because you never get that level of feedback from this. So it's just wonderful. And folks, have a great Thanksgiving. And for people who are new, we do meetups every day. So check out our meetups on 52 Living Ideas, and we look forward to seeing you. Roger,
in the spirit of gratitude, we have to just say a shout out to you and everything that you do for this group every single day.
Thank you very much, Shrikant.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.
Roger.
Thank you very much for all the time you put in, Shrikant. It's impressive.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shrikant.
It's been delightful. It's been delightful. Thank you. Thanks.
Hey, guys.
Bye.
Bye.